Next, we have Neil from Killi.
Okay, I'm bringing Frank up to the stage too. He's my trusty assistant. Not really, he's the CTO, so we're gonna tag team this. This will be do this live demo. So as we talked about, I'm the founder of Freckle. We launched Killi about a month ago, so I would encourage everybody to take out your phone, go to the Apple Store, go to the Android Store, and download the application, because we're going to go through the prompts. And as we go through the prompts, I'm going to sort of explain the rationales to why we set it up this way, etc. One sec. This is always risky doing this live. My wife will probably send me a grocery list on my phone, but whatever.
If it goes sideways, it's my fault.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. OK. So as we talked about on the panel, what we are trying to do is really try to bring the everyday consumer to the blockchain. I think what we think one of the biggest gaps in the ecosystem is today is that there's not that many people on it. And so if you are building a solution or you're building a product on the chain today, inevitably, in order for it to scale, you need to have people there. And so while there's a lot of businesses that are focusing on things like tokens, et cetera, what we're really trying to do is how do we create a product and a value proposition that brings the everyday consumer to the blockchain without confusing them about the nuances of the blockchain and setting them up to be successful with the blockchain in the future? And so this is less of a technology problem, I think, from our perspective. It was more of a UX product problem than anything else. And so I made reference to the fact is that what we tried to do is really make the blockchain component really, really simple. And so one thing that you'll find is that when you talk to a consumer, when you start talking to them about the blockchain, they tend to get confused very, very quickly. Most consumers understand that blockchain is new and that it is secure and it has value. But once you get past that, it tends to sort of fall apart. So let's walk through sort of some of the prompts here specifically. OK, so Killi, again, is a manifestation, in our opinion, of sort of 3 or 4 macro trends. One, we saw a 50–60% increase in data breaches year over year. Secondly, we knew that California privacy law and GDPR were coming into effect, and that if you were a brand or an advertiser, you needed compliance. And then last but not least, we felt that the value proposition for the consumer where, hey, if you're a consumer in North America, for example, Facebook makes $30 a month off of your data, growing 35% a year. When multiplying that out by the 5,000 firms in the ecosystem, arbitrarily you can get to a value of anywhere of 40 to 200. That's inevitable, right? $40 to $200. OK, so it starts to comply with a lot of the individual regulations, being 13 plus, et cetera. One thing that's important is that in this application, everything that we do, all the data has to have a corresponding validation associated to it. So this, from a verification code, obviously we're trying to remove individuals who are trying to spoof the application, et cetera. OK, so now that your identity has been verified, or at least the first part of it, this again starts to bring you into some of the individual prompts. And so for us, one of the things about creating this application was that we felt that ID and location was pretty paramount, specifically to what we do at Freckle, which is an offline attribution platform. Like most people, at the baseline of your solution, it relies on data. So Freckle relies on location data and identity. And so the first buyer of data, or the first customer for you as a consumer, is Freckle. And you'll see how we kind of work through this. So first and foremost, here's your advertising ID. We're obviously trying to show and explain to the consumer why this is important and what it actually has. When you decide to actually share this, you then can have the ability to share your location. Once you share your location, you should be able to, here's your first sale. So this is important for us from a consumer point of view, because I think what we've seen in the space before is people say, hey, put in all your data, and you might be able to make some money in the future. You might be able to. So this was really important for us to validate that there's actually a real use case associated to this. What we find from a UX perspective is typically what ends up happening here is the consumer tends to go one of 2 ways. They go immediately to a redemption option to say, OK, this is real. There's real money. And I think this is important. This is not a token. This is not crypto. This is cash. Cash, everybody understands the concept of cash. And so this is important for us. And so Once we've demonstrated that there's cash in the application, we find that the consumer tends to either pivot out to the redemption mechanism, which I'll show you. And inside of this application today, we allow you to redeem via Amazon gift card as well as PayPal. In the next release, which is next week, there's a charitable redemption. So should you decide to monetize your identity, you can give away that value, should you choose to a charity. We think that's a really important social component of the application. So on new opportunities, these are notifications to make sure inside of the application that you're aware of them. Here is where we actually would do validating your date of birth. Here, obviously, age and gender. You can expand on your email. So you can expand on your identity. All of these are individual data points, which actually, again, have a corresponding level of validation. This one is important. Share your phone number if you choose to. What you'll see is I'll get a notification here in my email, which actually allows me to confirm my individual email. And once you confirm this, you'll see that this is where the blockchain component will actually come in, which will give you your phrase. You'll see that come up in a second. Now, in addition to being able to actually add individual pieces of your identity to the profile, what we do provide to brands as well is the opportunity to actually ask individual questions specifically to users. And so an example would be, I'm an auto manufacturer, and I know individuals are going to my car dealership, but I actually don't know if they went there for vehicle A, vehicle B, or parts and service. Well, based on the various different prompts that the consumer has actually put in, age, gender, location, etc., you can actually determine that when you put forward a purchase order, what ends up happening is you can actually ask that individual who was seen on that Lexus dealership, GM dealership, Audi dealership to say, hey, did you go for vehicle A, vehicle B, or parts and service, which allows them to actually accomplish that component or that piece of data that is actually missing from the value prop or the value chain today. Also really important to note is that the data that is actually collected gets put in any platform that you have today. So if you want this to go to a particular seat, if you want it to go to a DSP, if you want it to go to a particular DMP, you as a brand or as an agency do not have to change anything on your end. That's important because we know that if you have to rip out all of the architecture on the brand or the agency side, that's a tough road to hoe. So you do not have to do anything. You tell us where you would like this data to go, and we will provide it to you. One quick thing that I'll show you. So here's an example of what one of the surveys would look like from a brand. So in this particular case, which of the below do you purchase? In this case, we would say Starbucks. You're getting paid again. So whether you answer the question, this doesn't apply to me or not, you're always being paid. Here's the other piece which is also important. This is your recovery phrase, and you'll see that this is the blockchain component. Is your 24-word recovery code. So one thing you'll notice in this application is that we're not inundating the consumer with all the nuances of the blockchain. We're giving them a value prop. It's very simple. It's very clean, but we're actually securing the data specifically with them. And that's an important piece, is that when you're actually, with this individual data that you're actually inputting into the actual handset, it stays at the handset level. It does not sit inside of a central spot with us. We do not have a copy of it. It stays with you as a consumer. When a brand actually puts forward a purchase order, your handset will query into that, and if it reconciles with that, that is when the actual smart contract will actually be written. One other thing I will show you is that from an identity perspective, you have all the controls available to you. So should you remove your phone number from your actual targeting parameters, you can do that. If you would like to remove your date of birth, you can do that. If you would actually like to remove your email address, you can do that. You can delete your account. From a wallet perspective, again, these are the redemption methods that are available today. So again, these are things that everyday consumers are using every day. And also here is that, I think that's it. Here's the other thing which is important. You'll see here that in this particular case, every time your data is actually purchased, you can see a complete record of everybody that's ever purchased it. But when we went through this, that IDFA and that location that was actually purchased for 10 cents, that's actually purchased by Freckle. Freckle uses that to power its attribution platform, making it the only offline attribution platform in the world powered by blockchain harvested data. In the case of the individual survey, that was a survey put forward by McDonald's. That data is being used by McDonald's to power their advertising. Every single transaction that actually takes place inside of your profile will actually be recorded here, so you have a full understanding of what's there. Any questions? Sure.
How does the consumer handle kind of correct retail? So Freckle versus another, and then because we are being targeted on multiple devices, then we can effectively match the ad ID to multiple different variables. How do you kind of protect that?
Yeah, so the question was, how do you protect the identity from being resold first, right? So that one is who we decide to sell it to. So as an example, we don't sell data to an aggregator. We do not sell data to a data management platform. What we would do is we would sell it directly to a brand like Unilever, Procter & Gamble. The terms and conditions associated to that live and breathe specifically with Unilever. If Unilever decides to take that data and spin it out and sell it to somebody else, I mean, technically, they can choose to do that. We've halved the market to prevent that as much as possible, but at this point, it's almost impossible for us to protect again. You had a second question, though, too, right? No? OK, cool. At the back. Yeah, it's raw in the sense that we don't model the data. It's whatever the consumer, whatever you as a brand decided to purchase. If you were looking specifically for an email address, that's what you would get. If you were looking for a combination of age and gender plus IDFA, that's what you would get. Again, the more data you buy, the more expensive it gets, clearly. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Great. Hi. Yeah, so it's like everybody else in this space. I think we obviously started with a token and started with the idea of potentially doing an ICO. In the original form, there was a token on the outside. For us, what we felt was that was just going to be really difficult for adoption from a consumer perspective, where, congratulations, David, you've now got 10 Killi tokens. What are you doing with them? So then you have the situation where, is there liquidity in that? Like, what does the consumer do with that? Where I think if you ask anybody in this room, like, hey, your identity's worth X amount of money and it's worth $1, that's something that's pretty primal, and everybody understood that. So remember, at our core, what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring as many everyday consumers to the blockchain as possible, and so we needed to make that value prop as seamless as possible. So no token for that particular reason, which makes sense, right? Yeah, it's built on Ethereum, yeah. OK, I'll answer your question later. OK. Thanks, guys.